People in the project are sort of one thing. I'm really into the who. We work in jazz and improvisation, so it's all about individuals, their particular aesthetics and traits and personalities and ways of working.
Well, welcome, Andrea. Thanks for joining me for these three questions.
My
Uh,
pleasure, Mace. Thanks for inviting me.
oh, of course. The first question is why do you have music in your life?
Well, I have music in my life. I don't exactly know why. It's just always been there. And, I don't think that it's just by chance that it's been there. I was definitely, or I'm told that I was always asking for it well before the time that I was given any sort of lessons or taken along to anything musical. Um, so I actually don't remember those days. They're sort of before my memory starts. So yeah, I think I was always intrigued by it, always interested. It always, I mean, still it makes me feel this whole plethora of emotions that whether they're uplifting or not, I enjoy. I enjoy that the full gamut of what it can bring to your soul and your feelings
Mm.
and your life. So obviously from a very early age that already struck me back then.
Do you? Oh, sorry. Do you remember? You were asking about music. Was it asking about playing it or asking about listening to it? Do you sort of know what drew you to music?
I th- I think it was asking about playing it. I have a very early memory, I think I was about three, of standing in our lounge room holding a violin and showing one of our guests how I should put my feet. I don't remember making a sound on it because I think I'd had a lesson and all I'd been shown was how to hold it, or.
Well, that is the most important thing.
I think that might have been the only violin lesson I had, though, because I don't remember ever touching it again. My mother told me that I was really asking for piano lessons for a very long time. And I started those probably when I was late six or early seven, I think. Um, but both my parents really loved music. Neither of them are musicians. My mother's father, so my grandfather on my mother's side, was a self-taught accordion player, and he owned a pub in the old Czechoslovakia. Um,
Right.
so there was music in the genes, and certainly my father was a self-taught guitarist, and he could kind of sing and strum through a few tunes and
Mm.
around the campfire and make people laugh with dirty songs and jokes and
Oh,
whatever.
amazing.
So that was definitely in our family life and in our genes. My father didn't necessarily take me to concerts. He would always listen to the radio and he was more into sort of pop music. But my mother used to take me to a lot of concerts. So I think probably when I was asking to play was probably that she was taking me to concerts and I
Mm.
was hearing people and seeing what they were doing and I was just totally enamored with it.
And
I mean,
what type? Oh, what
what
type of music? Yeah, what kind of concerts were you seeing?
that was classical music and the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and things like that. I have
Right.
memories of being really quite young, I think even as early as four. And, I think my mother just wanted to go to these concerts and she wanted a companion. So she would drag me along to these evening concerts.
Oh, great.
And I'd be sitting in the opera house, listening to the orchestra. And eventually I would fall asleep. And I remember how uncomfortable those wooden chairs were and your ribs and stuff. And I'd be sort of, falling down onto her and she'd be nudging me because she'd paid however many dollars for the
Mm.
tickets, thinking, don't you dare sleep on this. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, so that started really young. But then I've got an older brother who's also has music in his life. And as we grew older, she wouldn't necessarily come with us anymore. But I remember her buying us tickets to all kinds of things. Like she bought us tickets to see Wynton Marsalis. And I'd never even heard of him. And I was just blown away by his group, also at the Opera House and the Kronos Quartet. And,
Mm.
she just exposed us to a lot of music of all different styles. She took me to my first jazz concert when I was 13 to see Judy Bailey and Roger Frampton play a two piano
Oh,
thing at
oh,
the Art
wow.
Gallery in Sydney. Yeah, that changed everything for me, really.
Yeah. I mean, that's an incredible opening of very, very fine. amazing music for a young person. I mean,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah,
amazing.
I was really privileged, like,
Mm.
so fortunate.
And that
Um,
accompanied with your dad singing dirty songs around the campfire. I mean, what a great sort of like range of access of
spot
what
on.
music can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And what it provides for people's lives, and that you don't have to be a professional. Like it's part of life. It's
Mm.
part of the experience of communicating with other people and connecting.
Yeah, and do you sort of I guess because you said was it your mum or father's side Czechoslovakian? I mean, does the cultural aspect come into it um, anywhere, sort of in your journey?
I'd say so. Both my parents were Czech, and they escaped out to Australia in 1968 when the communists
Yeah,
arrived
well,
in the Czech Republic, when the Russians arrived. Um, and so when they came here, they landed in Sydney, and they were put in what was called silver cities, is what they remember it being called, and eventually sort of were able to settle into the community. But of course, a lot of other Czech people were coming out in that same time, or had come out just before them, or were still coming out after, because there was a lot of political turmoil going on in that part of the world at the time. So they really bonded together with a lot of people from the Czech community that, of course, they didn't know in their motherland, but through this journey in the Silver Cities and then entering the community in Australia, they were really welcomed and supported by other Czechs who had come before them. So definitely growing up, we were a big part of that community. And I don't recall necessarily any professional musicians in there, but there was certainly a lot of hobbyists.
mm,
A lot of people could play, a lot of people sang, a fiddle player, like a gypsy fiddle player,
yeah,
lots of guitar, lots of camping, lots of being out in the bush for really long periods in this
yeah,
community, in this Czech community,
yeah,
making music, and they all knew the same songs, and
yeah. I find that when when you travel and you go to other countries, that sort of that cultural, everyone knows the same songs and just sitting around and singing, and everyone has this repertoire um, that comes from a sort of a cultural, background is just so enviable, especially
yeah,
growing up in a sort of Australian white English background. I guess studying jazz, there's that shared repertoire, but there's something very beautiful about just someone on an accordion or guitar and everyone just singing those songs. It's just such a. I would have loved to have sort of been brought up in an
yeah.
environment like that. Yeah.
Because that's coming from a really rich folk heritage, like the
Mm,
Moravian folk music in the Czech Republic is what they're all drawing from, and there's songs that they all learnt as little children, really,
mm,
or even at school, or their parents would sing it to them, and it's a long sort of lineage of that music in that culture.
mm,
And yeah, we do miss that, unfortunately. But I think you're right. Jazz fulfills maybe that part, certainly that part of community,
mm.
and that part of shared repertoire, definitely, like you say.
Yeah. Well, maybe you get to the second question, which is how do you make music?
How do I make music? Well, I spend my time as a piano player and a composer. I really love composing, and I try to make music every day. Uh, Sometimes it might only be 5 minutes, or sometimes it's like many hours. It really depends what each day brings and what the priorities are, and they're constantly shifting in our complex world.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm drawn to it every day. I'm thinking about it all the time, thinking about plans of what I want to be doing. And they're not sort of, I don't consider them career goals. I mean, maybe I should change the way I'm thinking, but they're not career goals. It's all about what music do I want to make and who do I want to make it with. And
Mm.
I just love dreaming up projects. So,
So do you feel as if a lot of your music making, either on piano or composition, is, I guess, yeah, project based? So you sort of create a project and then you make music for that, or you make music and then a project come out of that,
most of the
or
time I think,
vice versa? Yeah.
yeah, most of the time I think of the project and the people.
Mm.
People and the project are sort of one thing. I'm really into the Who,
Yeah.
of course, because we work in jazz and improvisation, so it's all about individuals and their particular aesthetics and traits and personalities and ways of working. Those are all the things that I'm really interested in and that I'm drawn to. So I think about the Who, and often that, you know, that goes hand in hand with what sort of project could this be. And then the music will come based on some parameters that I've set up. You know, it's all dependent on, I mean, you create music for large amounts of people, and you know, even when you make music that includes people that span a lot of the geography of Australia, like those sort of restrictions, or not restrictions, but those elements of the project are going to dictate somewhat what the music is like, or how you perceive the project to be. So yeah, so then I create music for that bunch of people, for the situation, for all of those aspects. And I like, you know, when I'm creating a project, it's generally got a theme. I like it when things have a theme or a focus or some kind of line that can bring everything together and just keep it centered and keep it on the same track. So I'm doing that more and more, where the projects really have a central focus. Sometimes, however, I do just write music because I feel like it, or there's something on my mind, or I played with something a few days ago and it stayed with me and I want to explore it more, and then something grows out of it. So sometimes music just happens, it just gets created outside of all of that bigger stuff, which is nice too, you know, to be able to create it in the spur of the moment or much more of a long-term plan.
Yeah, I guess, and if you're in the middle of a project and you just create music for the sake of it, it's often, you know, if you're in the mindset of that project, it is often linked somehow, or if you're using the same musicians, you know, they're all going to bring themselves to it. So you can, I guess, kind of link it. It's going to link itself sometimes.
Absolutely.
Or like an old piece of music that you bring to a new group of people, they're going to add their personality and flavour.
Exactly. I love reinventing older things with for a new group or for a new group of people. I've been doing that a bit with Five Below, one of the bands that I run. That's in fact how we started. I just totally reinvented all this old material of mine for that bunch of people, and
Bring
I
out
loved
the
what
hits.
came out of it. Yeah, but
The
you know,
Andrea
it was
Keller hits.
no, yeah, my greatest hits.
Greatest hits.
The thing I loved about doing that is that, you know, I write a lot of music. I'm not overly precious about it, about what I write. Like, I'd love it to be good, and I'd really love it if people like it, but that's not what drives it. I just make it and I put it out there, and I feel like the presenting it, whether in performance or in a recording, like a documenting kind of framework, I feel like that's really important, because it's just documenting what you're doing, who you're working with, where everyone's at, what sort of sounds you're making and what you're interested in. And I think that as artists, as creative artists, we just need to do that. Not everything's going to be really polished. Generally I try not to put out things that I'm really not happy with. But on the whole, I'm not too precious about it all. But something that comes out of that is, you know, years and years of trying new stuff and putting things out. You know, sometimes you look back and you go, I really like that, but I just hate all of this stuff that I thought I had to put in there, or whatever it was. So part of this process of reinventing is just to go, actually, no, I'm just going to take the diamonds and I'm going to just leave everything else. I'm just going to put the diamonds over here and see what we can do with these, you know, with these gems. So I've really enjoyed that, like just being quite ruthless with what isn't working and just get rid of it and try it again with what you think is working. So that's been quite fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's very hard to not be what was the word that you used?
Precious?
Yeah, precious about certain things. But if you are overly precious, you don't get anything done, or you don't release anything. You know, you're always waiting to get, you know, record that album that's going to be perfect, and you've just got to document what you're doing at the moment, put it out, and go to the next thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise you were just still waiting to release that album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, yeah, I think it's important maybe to distinguish that, being precious in that way that you're just describing, where you end up not putting things out because they're sort of never good enough. That's really stifling. And if you think about all the negative self-talk that goes along with
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
like that's really not good for us. We don't need that. None of us
No,
need
there's
that.
enough of that in our life.
Yeah. So we don't need to put ourselves through that. So,
Yeah.
we can lay off on that a bit and give ourselves a bit of a break. But at the same time, I just want to distinguish that it's not that I'm really flippant with everything and I just do it
No, of
a
course.
bit half-baked and put it out. Like I do actually care about it. I do spend hours and hours thinking about a couple of bars or a texture or and I get stuck on things just going, it's not right. I know it's not right. I haven't found the right thing. So I do actually invest a lot of time and thought and care. I really care about it. But it's more that there's a certain point where I go, yeah, it's pretty good, and then I just leave it at that.
Yeah. Because I mean, the deeper you dig, I mean, you can always find something wrong, and it
Yeah.
sometimes feels like you're just like searching for something that's wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like, oh, there's got to be something, rather than stepping back and going, oh, well, I'm pulling apart all this amazing stuff, or really great sounding things, or just to try to find something negative. But yeah, so I guess I think it's the way we're kind of wired as well. You're trying to always improve and excel. But yeah, I totally understand what you mean. You're not just a couple of things on a bit of paper, record this, put it out, release it. I don't care.
Although that has worked for people in history, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, think of some of those Miles albums where they, the stories are that they just were in the studio and someone pulled out this sheet of paper and they were all sort of muddling their way through it. And, it's created some of the greatest music and, so I'm not dissing that because some people work really well that way.
And I love that idea that if Miles was happy with his solo, that was the take. Didn't matter if the other band members could just bomb, but it was like, yep, that's it. Sweet.
Oh, gee, that's the rhythm section player's tale, isn't it? Just, 50 takes, trumpet player finally gets it right. You've made a mistake. That's the one they're keeping.
Yeah, it's the one time you make a mistake, yeah. That clangor of a chord, yeah. It's like, that will haunt you forever, yeah. Well, the third question is what excites you musically right now?
Oh, look. I'm not listening to a great deal of music at the moment because of our situation, and I'm not driving anywhere much because we're in lockdown. And I used to drive a lot, and because I have a family and live in a very small house, the car was my sanctuary for listening to music.
Right.
So anytime I bought a new album, it's like I can't wait to drive to work so I can just listen to it over and over again. So I've lost that a little bit at the moment, but what's taken its place, I suppose, is having this extra time at home and with less work and less touring and that sort of thing. I've actually been able to listen to a whole backlog of stuff that I've recorded. So I've been listening to a lot of the projects that I've been doing for the last 2 years that, some of them I only listened to once and then thought I'll have to do something with that on a rainy day. But I'm actually getting through a lot of that stuff. So I don't necessarily, anyway. But one thing I suppose that has been really fantastic is the research that I've been doing into Arvo Pärt, the Estonian composer. And that I have found really exciting in music. I started listening to his music about 10 years ago, just by chance in the car. The CD was left in the car. And on my early morning drives, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Couldn't stop listening to it. Started buying some of the scores because I found them so intriguing. And started discovering a lot of his approaches to composition, which is very pattern-based and very mathematical almost. And I was really struck by this idea that the music didn't sound mathematical or formulaic, or even I couldn't necessarily hear the patterns in it, or I couldn't discern them specifically just from listening.
Yeah.
But the music structurally seemed to make so much sense to me. It also seemed incredibly organic and just intensely beautiful. And when I found out that underlying it was all this structure and patterning, I was really intrigued by that. And a friend of mine pointed out that it's just like in nature with the golden mean. The structure of things is actually so mathematical and symmetrical, or whatever it is, the way it's very organized. It's highly organized. But the result, when you look at the flowers in the garden or whatever it is, just seems pure organic beauty. You don't feel that sense of structure necessarily. But this investigation into Arvo Päht's music and these patterns and this effect on the organic beauty of the sound and all of that has been really interesting for me musically. Also watching videos, and even I was really honoured to meet him a couple of times and have some conversations with him. Hearing him talk about his music, he's very emotionally attached to it. He's very connected to it. It's not just that he's come up with some kind of formula for something and let it all play out by chance on the page and that there's no emotional connection to it. He's actually very deeply connected to the music and the meaning of it. And so I've just found that really intriguing. And that's kind of been taking over my music making processes and my interest lately. And I found that for me, that's been able to give my music a lot more meaning. At first, when I was discovering his music, I was just working a lot with patterns, like coming up with my own patterns, somehow inspired by him. And I enjoyed that, making that music, and I still sort of enjoy the sound of it, but for me there is something lacking in it, and I think it's actually that meaning. And he talks about this as part of his compositional process, that there's like this upbeat, there's this moment where he likens it to a conductor's upbeat, and that all the musicians in the ensemble in that moment, they have a sense of everything that's about to come. All the dynamics, the mood, the melodies, the rhythm, everything. So he talks about that in his compositional process, this feeling of the upbeat, or the sort of imagining this sense of the whole, and then he finds a pattern that's going to help him create what he imagined. So that's where the sort of emotional connection comes in. So that's really, I'm just working with that a lot. I'm trying to be him. I'm not trying to be him. I take that back. I'm trying to be myself, but I'm inspired by him. I'm really inspired by that. Because as you said before, like I want to keep getting better. We all want to keep getting better, and we want to learn from all the things we've done in the past, keep what was good, get rid of what didn't work. And so, in my process of all these, few decades of doing this, I'm finding that I just want more meaning. I want things to be more meaningful. And I'm also more and more interested in my sound. We talk about that a lot in jazz and as improvisers, having your own voice. And I was really fortunate when I studied in Melbourne under Brian Brown's leadership at the what was then the Victorian College of the Arts. That was his thing, finding your own voice. So as an improviser, I was exposed to that at quite a young age, and that certainly had an impact on me. But now, as I'm getting older and I've just been doing it more and more and more, I'm just as a composer, I think especially, I'm really trying to find my own voice in that's recognizable as me. And I think some of these things that I'm grabbing from Arvo Päht and the processes I'm working with are helping me get closer to that. The beauty is I'll never reach, none of us will ever reach what we think is the epitome or the end point or we're never going to get there. And that's the great thing about it. We can live to be extremely old and still be totally
frustrated,
occupied and frustrated.
Inspired. That's what. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time and for answering the 3 questions. Yeah, it's been very, very insightful and informative. Thank you. And
really lovely.
Hope to see you in person soon.
Yes, me too.